All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our smart robot setup here in basic programming tutorials. So, what we have right here is our program from the previous one running. We're going forward and backward. We're stopping the robot for 1 second in between. And I'm just going to flip the motors off real quick because, yeah, that's enough of that. So, everything else besides the motors will run without the battery. Uh, I just flip the battery off in the back to make that stop. So the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to attach the servo so we can start moving it. So now one disclaimer and one recommendation before you start this. This servo is in there. Let me get the pointer pencil out here. This servo is in here with the one screw, which is kind of behind these wires right there underneath. What I would recommend to you to do before you run the servo is, unless you know it's actually centered and going the right position, I would actually take this top part off, loosen that screw, and just take that whole top part off, just to make sure that you know it's actually in the right position. There is a possibility that it is in the wrong position and is not going to operate very properly. One other thing that, oops, sorry about that. One other thing I had to do is my servo cable. I actually, to be honest, full disclosure, I broke the servo the first time. So I had to use another one that I had on hand. You'll see that I'm actually bending the pin. I had some trouble connecting the servo. So if you take a look, let me see if I can pause this and get you a better look. Well, this should probably work okay. If you take a look at the servo, that orange cable should be on the outside. The red should be in the middle. The brown, which is kind of hard to see with my pencil in the way, should be on the inside. It is important that you attach it in that way. Otherwise, again, the servo won't work. As we're troubleshooting before, we'd have to troubleshoot. And maybe in the default robot code that you already have this kind of working, and that's okay. So just make sure your servo's attached this way. I actually had to kind of bend it. You see it's kind of around the back here. That's keeping a little tension on the servo to make sure that it doesn't get all not working. So let's go ahead and get this servo attached in our code here. So Servo actually is an external library. There is indeed in our files app here in our examples, um, there is a servo in one of these things here. I forgot kind of where it is. It's right. I think it's right towards the bottom here. Well, anyway, you should be able to find an example for servo in here. I just, of course, as you're recording a video, it's just not findable. You can scroll. There's actually are always more on the bottom, and servo actually is there. So there are a couple of different options that you can check out if for some reason something doesn't work. But I'm going to kind of show you how to make this work without having to do all that stuff. What we're going to do to start this out is we're going to just attach the library and set it to be right in the middle and then go from there. So let's go ahead and get that started. So the first thing you need to do is you have to include an external library, which is servo.h, which is our library. There are a couple ways you can do this. So in your tools, you can actually manage the libraries up here. And servo should be one that comes up right there. This one's installed. So you can actually, you should be able to just go ahead and include that. I think I actually hit the wrong thing to include it. So if we go to tools and we go to actually sketch and we go to include library, servo is actually one of our options. So again, that's in sketch. That is include library. We're going to include that servo in there. Now, you probably aren't going to have all the ones that I do. I installed a couple of extra ones just because I did. So we're going to include that servo library in the top. That should be, for me, includes always go on the very top. Then we have the definitions, and then we have the setup. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to, underneath our definitions, we're going to declare a couple of variables. So our servo, we're going to declare one is called US servo. And we'll just comment this up. So this is the servo for the ultrasonic. So that way we know what it is. And what we're going to do is we're also going to declare one other variable, which is going to be an integer data type. So to declare this, we'll go ahead and declare that position is 0 for right now. So integers are data type. For servo, you can do, for this servo, you can declare a position of between 0 and 180 degrees. This servo has 180 degrees of rotation. There are many different kinds of servos. If you did FTC robotics, there's some far nicer servos that we use for that. However, for this one, you get 0 to 180 is what you should set. So we've gone and we've done that. Now in our setup, we've set up our serial, we set up our pins for the motors. Attach the servo is what we need to do. So what we have is our US servo, our ultrasonic servo, and what we have to do first is we have to attach that servo. So attach is a specific method used in that servo library. And in here, we have to specify what pin that servo is attached to. And that would be pin number 3. So also for our US servo, we are going to go ahead and write that to be 90. So write, so see, set to the middle. 90 is the middle. If you have 0 to 180, 90 is exactly halfway. So now this would be the point right here where you should make sure that your robot is definitely attached here. And before you go and you set the servo to do anything, make sure that you know that this is set in the right position. I can tell you I did it wrong. I set it to the wrong position when I started it up. So I would suggest before you run this program that you take that off and double check. I know I said that once already. Sorry, this thing right here, you should definitely make sure you take it off. So after you do that and you upload your code, what you should do is you should see that servo snap to the middle. If you saw it just turn a little bit to the middle there, that is what you should see happen. So now you know if it's 90, that is pointing directly forward. And that's kind of what you want. You want to start kind of in the middle. Now we're going to do one little method here, and you can kind of modify this method for your needs in particular. When you are actually writing your code for the challenges, you can modify this in any way that you want. So for our servo, we have our drive methods right down here. And what we have right here. So for this method right here, we're going to go and we'll just go ahead and set up a comment here to say what this is. I'm going to move it up a little bit. You don't have to hit enter like that, but what you should, I'm going to do it so it's not so much on the bottom. So let's see, scan. So we're going to do a method to scan with the servo. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this thing, I think I called it something like servo scan, something like that. That is exactly what I called it. So we actually need these curly braces like that. So for our servo scan, we're going to actually use a control structure. We're going to use a for loop. And what we're going to do is we're going to take and we're going to make it go from 180, from 0 to 180, and then 180 back to 0. So I'm going to just go ahead and put these for loops in for you so you don't have to watch me type these painfully. And you can kind of pause and get them in. So you can see some of the comments on there. So this goes from 0 to 180, and it increments it in 1 degree every 10 milliseconds. And then it goes from 180 back to 10. So let's watch and see what this does as it works. If as we upload our code, what we should do, so we have our initialization. We should have our initialization. Maybe. Oh, you know what I didn't do? You're probably sitting there thinking, well, you didn't put that in the loop, and you're correct. So let's go ahead and take it and put that in the loop. So we're going to go forward, stop, back, stop. And then we're going to, what did I call that thing again? Servo scan. Right there. And then we'll just go ahead and at the end of that, since this is just a demo, we'll scan our servo and then reset it back to the middle to stop. So let's go ahead and upload and see if this works the way that I want it to work. So you can see that it scans, it goes back to the middle. So we're driving, we scan the servo, and we're driving, and then we scan the servo as we should. So that's what your code does. And if you take a look back there, we have these two things that are in the loop. And doing everything like this with the functions, like we're setting it up, is definitely the best way because your loop is much less dirty. And it's just really a lot easier to have your chunks of code be reusable. So just as a recap here, we have our servo scan. And we have, just be careful about your curly braces here, because that is one of the spots where you can kind of get yourself in trouble. Let me just cut back to the code only for you so you can kind of see that a little bit clearer. And that should be all for this particular video. So now what you have is you have the wheels that work, you have the servo that works. The last part in the last video that I think we'll do for now is going to be the ultrasonic sensor. We'll probably do an ultrasonic and a line follow just to kind of double check and see those work. But for right now, that's the end of this particular video. I will see you for the next one.